This is 207.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to 207. I'm Rob Caldwell.
And I'm Kathleen Shannon. Every day in America, someone faces a crisis, whether it be an illness or financial trouble. So what does it take to overcome these challenges? That's the question Ben Sherwood set out to answer in his new book, The Survivors Club. We'll talk with him about that and what he found out.
Also ahead, a history lesson and a little music with Zach Levi and Joshua Gomez of the TV show Chuck, and some high-energy bluegrass from the band High Range.
But first tonight, he was one of America's top rock and roll disc jockeys. If you grew up in Boston, around Boston in the 1950s and 60s, and had a transistor radio, remember those? Glued to your ear, you were probably listening to Arnie Woo-Woo Ginsburg.
Arnie retired in Maine, and this week he dropped by the Portland Museum of Art to check out the rock and roll photography exhibition and to talk with our Pat Callahan.
And then, of course, rock and roll. Well, here's another blast from the past.
It's not often a sound like that echoes through the Portland Museum of Art. Only when legendary disc jockey Arnie Ginsburg drops by for a chat. Arnie's interest in radio began as a boy in Boston, where he tinkered with electronics. But he became a star behind the mic at WMEX.
Arnie Ginsburg, the guy with the swinging show. Down in Boston, Mass, he's the guy that the kids all know.
First went on 1956, and what a perfect year, because the baby boomers were booming, and Elvis Presley was just coming up.
Well, since my baby left me, well, I found a new place to dwell. Well,
It just kept growing and growing and growing.
Heartbreak Hotel where I'll be.
Ginsburg helped make WMEX the Boston rock and roll radio powerhouse. The Night Train show was heard each night from 9 until midnight. He became woo-woo with the help of a musician friend.
He walked in with this. I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, try it. When you blow it, goes woo-woo." No, I said, "Go." I said, "Wow, that's great. I'm going to use that. I'm going to be Woo-Woo Ginsburg."
Inspired.
And it just caught on, and in fact, my license plate is Woo.
Well, anybody who listens to your shows knows you were, let's put it mildly, energetic with the sound effects.
But anyway, I added a lot of sound effects. In fact, one night, Johnny Mathis, who was a singer, stopped in the studio, and I had all this apparatus laid out, and he said, "Hey, man, what are you doing? Are you doing surgery?" Anyway, I had, in those days, they always gave the time on radio. So I'd say WMEX cuckoo time, 9:27.
And he'd use sound effects on the commercials for his teenaged audience.
We had sponsors like Stridex, Pfizer, Hex, Clearasil, and I'd say, "Hey, kids, do you have pimples?"
DJs were closely linked with their biggest sponsors. For Arnie, it was a drive-in burger joint called the Adventure Car Hop in Saugus.
Oh, Adventure Car Hop is the place to go for food that's always right.
You also had your own burger.
Oh, yes, the Ginsburger.
What made the Ginsburger special?
Well, first of all, it was a 2-for-1 special, actually 3-for-1 special, because you got 2 burgers and indigestion. No, it was special because it had a twist on the top. They would drop an onion ring in the fat and put it on, and it was the twist, and it had other things. It was good. That was a big sponsor for years and years and years, and it had a theme song.
Hi there, this is Arnie Ginsburg telling you that Adventure Car Hop presents for the first time anywhere, the Ginsburger.
Oh, Adventure Car Hop is the place to go for
People that I run into now, they meet me the first time, they say, "You woo," and they start singing the Adventure Car Hop commercial. They know the words. I can't even remember them now.
Hi, this is Sonny.
And Cher.
And we're saying hello to Arnie Ginsburg. And I got woo, babe.
If you wanted your record to be a hit, you needed woo-woo to play it, so the stars came calling.
Hey, baby, this is Jerry Lee Lewis. And if you're walking down Commonwealth Avenue with your transistor on, you'd better be listening to Arnie Ginsburg. Cats, he's with it, I guarantee you.
Arnie could even make hits happen without trying.
I said,
it was a controversial song about the lyrics. Actually, the Kingsmen that record Louie Louie just didn't articulate very well. There was nothing obscene in it. But anyway, nobody had really played Louie Louie, and I was sent a copy and said, see what you think of this. And I had control of my own radio program. I could play or reject any records I wanted. And that's why they sent me a copy and said, this one's different. I listened to it, and I said, this is terrible. I said, this is the worst song I've ever heard. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to play it as the worst record of the night.
Okay, let's give it to him right now.
So I introduce it as the worst record of the week and played it, I think, 2 times or 3. I can't remember. The next morning, when I came into the station, the secretary at the switchboard said, Arnie, we're getting a lot of calls from record stores. They want to know who distributes Louie Louie. I said, oh, no.
Ginsburg, who has made his home in Ogunquit for many years now, was no stranger to Maine in his DJ days. Stephen King was evidently a woo-woo fan because he made it into King's novel, It.
Our signal from WMEX went right up the coast, right into Bangor, too, from Boston. And there's a whole couple of pages here, and they describe that Ritchie, there were only 2 sources of rock and roll for Ritchie. American Bandstand on Channel 7 in Bangor in the afternoon, and WMEX out of Boston at night, where the air thinned and the hoarse, enthusiastic voice of Arnie Ginsburg came wavering in and out like the voice of a ghost call up at a seance. Is that perfect? Stephen King writing?
You can get a taste of what an Arnie Ginsburg broadcast sounded like from an album called Cruisin' 1961, part of a series surveying rock and roll radio. As Arnie likes to point out, the covers give you a sense of how much things have changed.
The Cruisin' 1958 one, this is a Chevy, but look at the price of gasoline, 19.9 cents for regular, and high test was 22.9 cents a gallon.
He plays all the records, especially for you. It's Arnie Ginsburg on the Night Train Show.
Holy cow.
There's no doubt about it. Radio was more fun back in those days.
It was.
Arnie was also on the business side of broadcasting. Now, he owned, for instance, a music video TV station in Boston in the 1980s. I didn't even know there was such a thing.
So he was the original MTV creator.
Well, I don't know that I'd say that, but he was obviously riding the wave very early.
And he started radio station WSME in Sanford way back when, a station that, by the way, over the years has boasted such talent as Fred Nutter and Pat Callahan, his first paying radio job.
Arnie has got a lot of stories about his encounters with the people featured in the museum's rock and roll photography show. We'll be hearing more from Arnie in a future edition of 207. Recently spent some time with Arnie Woo-Woo Ginsburg. He's got a home in Ogunquit and was one of the nation's top disc jockeys at WMEX Radio in Boston in the 1950s and 60s. Our Pat Callahan walked through the rock and roll photography exhibit at the Portland Museum of Art with Arnie and heard some fascinating stories about getting up close and personal with some of the biggest names in the music business.
Arnie Ginsburg looks at these photos at the Portland Museum of Art the way the rest of us might look at our high school yearbooks. He knew many of these stars, and he was one of the most famous radio voices of the rock and roll era. He introduced the Beatles on stage in Boston at Suffolk Downs in 1966 and at the Boston Garden in 1964.
This is a picture of the front row. I had a seat in the front row, naturally, because I was the MC and had to sit somewhere. And these kids, if you look at the emotion, the little girl's right next to me, she's got her hands over her eyes, she's crying, and others were standing up on the chairs, where they were folding chairs at Boston Garden, and it was just, you really couldn't hear the Beatles. They were screaming so much. Some of them were actually fainting, standing on the chairs and just collapsing down. But this is the Beatles. And in the newspaper, it was on the front page of the paper, it said, "What the Beatles saw."
Because I told you before, oh, you can't do that.
The editor said, "Unidentified man on the right seems unimpressed by it all." That was me.
He was there to introduce the Rolling Stones as they began their 1966 U.S. tour in an unlikely spot.
The early Stones were booked to do a concert in Lynn, Massachusetts at the Manning Bowl, which is a football bowl. And it was rainy, a little rainy, drizzly that night.
The group was about 90 minutes late.
And the police in Lynn really didn't know how to handle big crowds. They put up these wooden, they call them wooden horses, about 10 feet from the stage. Well, a wooden horse, you know, you can just lean on it and it falls over. And the crowd, the Stones finally set up and are playing, and the kids' audience are pushing the horses over and coming up near the stage. Not doing any harm. The police let go of tear gas on the stage. So Mick Jagger and I, and Brian was in the band then, and I think he knew he was in the band, and we got tear gassed, and it came right at us, and I've never experienced tear gas before or since, but it works. It is awful, and poor Mickey, he still remembers that and will never forget it.
Arnie met Janis Joplin through a friend who was her road manager early in her career.
He called me up one day and said, Janis Joplin and Big Brother was a Big Brother in the Holding Company. We're appearing somewhere on the South Shore Saturday night. We'll have a party Sunday afternoon.
What it means, what it want, what it means, what you want, wow!
He said, "You gotta come." I said, "Oh, give me the address," and it was on Mass Avenue in Cambridge. And I'm looking for the address, and I realize it's an industrial area. And the building I see with the right number on it, it said, "Such and such iron lung factory." They manufactured iron lungs there.
And that's where they're having the party.
They were having the party upstairs. It turned out that it was my friend's uncle's factory that they had it. And there was Janis Joplin and the holding company and the rest. There she was in the, looked like she's wearing a yard sale. And she was great. And she had a big purse like this, like crochet, I don't know what it was, and colorful, with Southern Comfort, the drink Southern Comfort in it, and drinking right out of the bottle, straight. And it was just one of those memorable moments of, whenever I think of Janis Joplin to this day, she was a lot of fun. She was a great talent.
Arnie's favorite Elvis story concerns another of the all-time greats of rock and roll radio.
Remember Wolfman Jack?
The Wolfman is everywhere.
He was on this station in Mexico that covered all North America, you know. And Wolfman's kids, young, teenagers, wanted to see Elvis Presley, who was playing in Las Vegas.
Well, that's all right now, Mama. Anyway.
So Wolfman goes to the hotel, brings in, and has his two kids, and they watch the thing, and they're happy, and the thing ends, the show ends, and Wolfman and his two kids are getting ready to go when this big guy comes over and says, "Are you Wolfman?" And he says, "Yeah." He said, "Elvis would like to meet you." So Wolfman goes in, backstage, and Elvis said, "I listen to you all the time because I stay up at nights," and he was on overnight, yeah. And Elvis says, "Can I ask you a favor?" Wolfman says, "Yeah." He said, Elvis said, "Can I have your autograph?"
Arnie Ginsburg had more stories to share about the early days of rock and roll. If you'd like to hear them, we have streamed our entire conversation with Arnie in the 207 section of our websites. You'll also find more information on Backstage Pass, the rock and roll photography exhibit at the Portland Museum of Art.